Okay, we are live this morning. It's College Coffee Talk. I am Andy Lockwood with Lockwood College Prep, and every Friday we've started a new tradition just in time for the holidays to do 1 hour of free coaching. This is a chance for anyone, any parent of a college-bound teen or teen himself or herself who's not skipping school, to ask any burning question about college, the whole college process, about getting in to college, about paying for college, about getting off the deferred or what we used to call wait list for college. Let me just shut this light off. Bugging me. Oops. This is an opportunity just to get some one-on-one free advice. Let me help solve your most pressing college question. The backstory is that in 2017, I did a ton of one-on-one free phone calls, and I enjoy doing them. I just don't enjoy them, 10 or 11 times in one day. So for 18, what we decided to do is to free me up a little bit in terms of not giving out as much one-on-one coaching, but instead, every Friday until we decide it's not working anymore, free coaching for 1 hour. So I'm going to stay on here as long as people have questions for me. If you are just joining us, please say hi in the comments there. I'm just going to make sure you can hear me. Putting on the old guy specs. Let me just see what's going on my computer here. I see, see a lot of people here. All right, good. So just, again, let me know. Let me know what questions you have, and I will be checking them and trying to answer them. So while I'm waiting for those of you who are formulating your burning questions, so I want to tell you a little bit about a meeting I had yesterday with a client of mine, Isabella, who got deferred to Fordham. And Fordham, a few schools do this. Fordham's one of them. Fordham suggested that anyone who was deferred write a 150 to 300 word essay about Fordham. And specifically, the question was about what's the meaning of a Jesuit education to you, the applicant. So Isabella came into the office. She'd already written something that was really for another college and read it to me. And it talked a lot about her community service and things like that. So I thought it was pretty good. But what I said to her was, okay, that's good, but I want to know specifically what Fordham itself thinks about its Jesuit nature or its background, its orientation. So maybe 6 seconds later, I had brought up the web page on Fordham's site that discusses what the impact of a Jesuit education means in terms of their mission. So from there, if I could share my screen, I think this would be a little bit better of a little mini lesson here. But just picture it. Use your imagination. It's a picture of their website, and what I noticed in there was they said, okay, so this is what it means to be a Jesuit, to have a Jesuit education, and then they listed out, I think, 4 things. It's ba. So I said to Isabella, I'm like, okay, so there you go. There's your recipe. Think about it like you're baking a cake, and you've got to add a certain amount of eggs and flour and whatever. That is exactly what they're giving you right here. And she's like, oh, okay, that's easy. Because she thought she had to kind of come up with stuff on her own. She goes to a parochial school, so she was able, so she's already thinking like that. And I said, here's the good news. Number one, they're laying it right out here for you, so you don't have to question about where you should go with it. And number two, and we brought up her resume because I kept a copy on file. I said, you have so much stuff in your background that it's going to be very easy for you to match up what the impact of for lack of a better word, what a Jesuit education means to you. Instead of just kind of talking about a high level, it's let me demonstrate to you that here's an example of the I can't remember trying to help out the less fortunate. And throughout my high school career, I've been involved with activities such as So she's going to absolutely kill this essay. She's going to address it square on. And she and I were talking about it afterward because she said something like, I don't know if any people from my school are going to even know to do this. I said, I kind of think that it's a lost art. You really need, it's not like it's time consuming. You just have to be very focused and conscientious on what exactly they're asking in a question. So it's not just if you're deferred, it's just on a going forward basis. if any of you are, who are watching this either live or on replay, have essays to write, next summer for getting into college if you're class of 2019, or probably even in college itself, you always need to make sure you're answering the question head on, and sometimes they give you these guideposts that really aren't, they're kind of hidden in plain sight. They're not too hard to find once you kind of reorient your brain that way. Okay, so that's the little mini lesson there. All right, I'm seeing a question right now. Hello, Leslie. Okay, thanks for doing this. Is there any way to determine which schools do financial aid packages? If some of the funding is federal, will it disappear with all that's going on in D.C.? Now, that's interesting. So, lots up in the air. I try to, between people I've networked with in different parts of the country, and just reading the Department of Education proclamations and all that. So far, there doesn't seem to be any sign of any changes in how financial aid is giving out, specifically Pell Grants to low-income families. Most federal aid is for low-income families. I don't think that's going to change. I think it's too much of a sacred cow. The loans now, so Pell Grants are free. They don't have to be repaid. Student loans, I think, if anything changes, what I think is that the rates will go up on the unsubsidized. Maybe the subsidized and the unsubsidized. That would actually make more sense, because there's a lot of government involvement in subsidizing loans and charging below market rates. So I have no reason to speculate that that's going to happen imminently, but I would suspect that would be one thing that would happen, just because of the way that the current administration seems to be oriented toward government involvement. But on the other hand, education is one of these things that you just don't mess around with, particularly when you've got midterm elections coming up and all that. I don't think it's like cutting taxes. So there's a lot of people against cutting taxes, a lot of people for cutting taxes. They passed this bill. I guess it hasn't been signed yet technically, but now you see all these companies lined up to give bonuses and raise wages and all that type of stuff. I don't think you can pull it off for student loans. I don't think there's any equivalent of companies lining up. I don't think Trump can pressure colleges to start cutting their costs and all that, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't think that's one of the top priorities. I think they're turning to infrastructure and some other stuff. So I don't really expect too much in the way of change. I will tell you this, though, in terms of the private colleges, I'm predicting, I think we're going to do a prediction show, I think right after New Year's. So here's a little sneak preview. I do think there's going to continue to be a wave of consolidation of private colleges going under, because it's very hard for them to get butts in seats. So on that end, I think it actually is a good thing potentially for the consumer, for the college-bound family, because there's more competition, and colleges are being more strategic about doling out aid to families that don't necessarily qualify for it on a needs basis, but they might they would qualify it on a non-need basis, which is another way of saying merit scholarships. So I think there's going to be more merit money given out comparatively, probably from state schools also, because they have the same problem. If they're charging $50,000, let's just use a round number. Sadly, that might be a low round number. But if they're charging $50,000 and they have a choice of either giving a free ride to a low-income family, or let's say, 4 $12,500 scholarships to 4 affluent families that don't need the money, most of the time now, and this is unfortunate or fortunate depending on your point of view, kind of bums me out a little bit. But now the colleges, for the most part, if they had to pick one, they're giving out the $12,500 to each of the affluent families, or so-called affluent families, because they know that they're going to be able to pay the rest. So that's they're going to make up for revenue. It's all about revenue for these colleges. I was on a webinar a couple of days ago with a guy who is the I don't know if he's the dean of enrollment or something, but he's pretty high up in one of the colleges in the tri-state area, and he's been in some other pretty competitive name brand schools in the past. And his point was that college costs continue to go up because labor, hiring professors is very expensive, and just upkeep of physical plant is expensive in many cases. A lot of colleges have not kept up their facilities. And he mentioned a lot of different things. What he didn't mention, which I found personally a little irritating, are all the amenities the colleges are quote unquote forced to dole out. He didn't mention a lot of the sort of the admin, some of the what I would think are kind of fat type positions, not professors. They hire a lot of the growth in payroll for colleges does not really come from the professor side as much as it's come from the admin side. You've got directors of marketing, you've got also all credential specialists, all layers of bureaucracy. So that was conspicuously absent from his analysis there. So anyway, I don't think there's going to be much. Circling back, I don't know if there's going to be any real changes to speak of other than interest rate type things potentially, but I don't see any signs of it in the near term. But I'm always, periodically I'm checking out for that type of stuff. All right, let me see who else we got here. I see some friendly people potentially. James, Jump Shot Jimmy, and Ms. checking in. That's always nice. So again, this is an opportunity for you to lob in any questions about college burning questions. So right now what's happening this time of year is we're getting all kinds of results in from kids who applied early. We've had some very nice results, mixed like every year. Sometimes there's stuff we can't really explain. So we've had kids get into some of the most elite schools like Cornell and Stanford and Yale, and I'm really, really happy for these guys. They all worked really, really hard. And we've had some kids get deferred or rejected. Penn, we had a bunch of kids. I think we had 2 applying to Wharton this year. 1 got deferred, 1 was rejected. We had 1 get deferred from regular arts and sciences. We had another one get rejected from computer science as a major, which is a really hard major. And we also had kids get into Michigan and not get into Michigan. And sometimes the chit chat that we hear is, our district had a really bad time this year with Michigan, but last year they had a much better year. So my guidance counselors are really, they're scratching their heads. They have no idea what happened, that type of thing. So I did actually hear that. I had a conversation like that with one of our clients. I think that I understand why people try to find rhyme or reason in a process like this, but the flaw is that sometimes there isn't any perceivable rhyme or reason. Certainly not when you're talking about small data samples, little anecdotal samples like a certain high school or something. So it may seem that a particular high school did poorly or well, but it's really not about the high school. There's no quota, and I say this, whenever I say this, I know people kind of think, that doesn't make sense. What are you talking about? You can talk to any admissions officer, and what they'll tell you flat out is words to the effect of, no, we don't have a certain amount of people that we can take from any given school or not. And the reason for that is because you're competing with kids from all over the world in just about every case, but just about every college takes kids from all over. So you are certainly compared with other kids from your high school, not so much as a finite amount of spots that correspond to your high school, but it's really more about understanding the rigor and who the teachers are and the curriculum and all that type of stuff in your high school. That's the basis for a comparison. But there's a lot of things that are totally out of your control. So I'll address those. In the meantime, if you're just joining us and you have any burning college questions, pop them in comments. I'm checking them periodically, and I'll stay on until we run out of questions or I run out of stuff to talk about, which will bring me till about 2 a.m. No, I'm definitely getting off at 10 or earlier Eastern Standard Time. So what's in your control? What's in your control when you apply to college is, to some extent, your grades and your scores. Certainly partially, in your control. Your extracurricular activities are substantially in your control. And demonstrating interest is very much within your control. And the thing about demonstrating interest, which I'll define, is that some colleges care about it a little, and some colleges care about it a lot. They think it's very important. Most colleges blow it off. Do not blow it off. There's there's the really four different categories of how much a school counts as something. Either not interested at all at the low end, or very important at the top end, or something in the middle. Somewhat considered or considered. So some schools are notorious for not wanting to admit kids who are not interested. And the reason for that is because they don't want to waste a spot on someone, on admitting them, if they don't have a shot at landing them, because what they care about is the ratio of kids who are admitted to who actually matriculate. So that difference is called a yield, that percentage. So a college that has a 30% or 40% yield or higher, that's good. It helps them indirectly with rankings. It helps them with their trustees and all that type of thing. But if too many kids are like, thanks, but no thanks, I'm not going to come, that hurts the yield and has all those negative repercussions. So how do you demonstrate interest? Well, visiting, very important, but logging, making sure they know that you're there, and making sure that you follow up with admissions and they know that. I love it when kids visit colleges and sit down with department heads and ask them questions. A career center, that's another thing to do, not only to demonstrate interest, but also to get a good feel for if that school is actually right for you. Going to open houses, corresponding with admissions, personnel. Those are all ways to demonstrate interest. So when kids don't get into certain colleges, like Tulane, or if they're deferred, or what's another one? Tufts. A client of mine actually told me about this last year. There's something called the Tufts syndrome or Tufts effect or something, which has to do with demonstrating interest and protecting the yield. So that is something that is very much under your control. Just because I feel like I need to say this, there is a line between demonstrating interest and stalking. So you don't want to go too far. You can get up close to the line, but you don't want to go over the stalking line. All right, let's see what's going on here in the comments section. All right, hello to Leslie, Michelle. Okay, so let's see here. Last week's college coffee talk was prophetic. Our son was deferred to Tulane with super high stats. Oh God! So I'm sorry to hear that. I'm actually curious if you feel like he demonstrated interest or not. But yeah, Tulane is definitely one of those schools that seems to, every year, there's kids who get in with lower grades and scores at one high school, and kids with higher grades and scores get deferred or not. That happens with Michigan a lot also, but I don't think Michigan cares about the interest quotient as much. But I'm afraid to extrapolate. It's because we have such a narrow data sample. But I understand our tendency to want to see patterns. But yeah, let me know about that. Michelle, if he demonstrated interest enough as far as you're concerned. And then any suggestions? We'd need to jump on a plane stat. Hate to jump through hoops if it's not going to matter. Yeah, jumping on a plane is extreme, but certainly anyone deferred at any school, I think the best thing you can do is to send a letter to. I was actually texting a client back and forth right before we started the show today. What I would say is, thank you for considering my application. I just want to let you know that I'm still very, very interested in attending, whatever. If you can say this in good faith, I would say you're my top choice school, and I would be thrilled if you could let me off the deferred list. If you did, we'd be rushing in our deposit, right away. Likewise, if you've had any new good information to share with them, any new grades, any awards or accolades or accomplishments or something like that. I think I mentioned that last week. A client of mine was deferred to Duke, and since he had submitted his application, he won some kind of tournament, a debate tournament or something. So he was getting ready to do that. He's also writing a song about being deferred, and since then he got to Michigan, which was his number 2 choice school. So I'm not really sure where his head's at right now. I hope he still tries to get off the deferred list at Duke, but I would understand it if he doesn't. So anyway, that's my advice there. All right. Let me see what else we got in chat here. All right, Leslie, sorry if you answered already. My phone rang while you were talking. Is there a way to determine which schools really do financial aid packages? Okay. Well, you need to look at there isn't one easy way, but if you go to the College Board website, they'll certainly, and you click on the paying portion, you can see the percentage of need, a financial need a school meets, and if that's a higher percentage, that means they're pretty generous. You can look at the average amount of aid or scholarships and grants that they give, also on the College Board site. So those are two, I guess, clues, about it. But then the next part of it, which I can't really explain on a format like this, but I do talk about this in our workshops, is calculating your EFC, your expected family contribution, which usually people don't do anything about that until they actually file a FAFSA, a financial aid application, and then they get their EFC and they're like, what does this mean? But if you go on the FAFSA website, you'll be able to see a FAFSA forecaster or a calculator, plus a lot of colleges post these calculators on their sites. They're reasonably accurate. I won't say that they're accurate to the dollar, but they're reasonably accurate. But among those different choices, the College Board, the percentage of need met, the College Board average award given, the FAFSA calculator, and each college's net price calculator. That's what you should be looking at on each college sites. Those should give you a reasonable idea. Reasonable, okay, not 100% fail-safe accurate. Okay. All right, Michelle said you emailed them a couple times. I guess you're talking about Tulane. Yeah, I don't know if that rises to the level, honestly, because it's very easy to send an email, but demonstrating interest, a stronger demonstration of interest. I'm wondering if you did this. I'm not saying you didn't do it, but would be showing up at the open houses, of course, visiting, things like that. But it's very easy to send an email. I don't know if that's anything that's going to be impressionable compared to walking up and shaking hands with the admissions rep and introducing yourself and giving them a copy of your resume and then those types of a little more hustle, I think. So let me know if you did that. Okay, Leslie, you are welcome. Karen, do state schools negotiate if scores and GPA are in the top 25%? Well, the answer is I always try. It's harder to negotiate with state schools. However, every once in a while, we're able to cough up another couple $1,000. When I talk about negotiating with colleges and I give examples, I don't know if you've ever been to a live workshop of ours, but I usually circulate around before and after examples, and some of them are pretty crazy. $0 to $51,000. That was a big win from last year. An extra $10,000, $20,000, those types per year. By the way, those are big examples. I'm almost never able to come anywhere close to that on a state school, just because they don't have that much money. But that being said, I think the tide is turning a little bit because every year that goes by, state universities have more and more of their funding removed, percentage-wise, and in real dollars from their own respective state governments. So I think it's always worth a shot. There's very little down. I mean, I used to say there's absolutely no downside to asking for more money, to negotiating for more money. I used to say that until I heard this story last year from someone who subsequently hired us. But the story was that this client the kid got into Boston College, great school, and received an award of $15,000 per year. And then they went and they worked with someone else who helped them with the financial aid applications. And they asked for more money. They said, well, can you reevaluate our award, which I think is fine to do. Again, in most cases, that's okay to do. What ended up happening was that BC reevaluated their award and took away the $15,000 per year. And my client was like, okay, at the time, she was like, what happened? So apparently what had happened was, and this is a little esoteric, but I'm just going to try to summarize it for you because it's not that esoteric. It could apply to you. What happened was she had some CDs that threw off some interest. She didn't disclose that she owned the CDs under the advice of the other college funding person, which is not how we recommend people do things. I understood the argument because she had borrowed against the CDs, but still, you explain all that stuff. So what happened was Boston College reevaluated the client's award, and they looked at the interest on their tax returns, and they said to this person, "Hey, we don't see any asset that generated this interest. What happened? Where did it come from?" And the woman, the mom, said, "Well, I was advised by this other person to not put it on there." And Boston College said, "No, we don't like that, and we're going to punish you for not disclosing things accurately on these forms. And you're lucky that all we're doing is taking your money away, your award away, as opposed to reporting you to the federal government for lying on a financial aid, a federal form, because the penalties for that are jail time and fines and maybe some other stuff." So if you haven't done anything odd or underboard, something that's not overboard, above water, I guess is the right word, then I wouldn't bother trying to appeal. I wouldn't worry about appealing. But if you did something that's a little sketchy or questionable, which people do, I'm not judging. We just never recommend stuff like that. But I personally don't think that's smart to do. Definitely don't appeal. Let sleeping dogs lie if you got an award. Okay. All right. I see some more action coming in here. I see Jimmy Giddon joined. I can't wait for his comments. Michelle, you are welcome. Leslie, you're welcome. Karen Grant, is there a downside to waiting until April to accept I want to use our leverage? No, I actually think that's a smart thing to do, because, and I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is by leverage is that maybe you've already gotten an award from one school, but you still haven't heard from many other colleges, and you're still waiting to get other offers, and possibly use those other offers against the top choice school that you currently have an offer from. So that's what we advocate. I'm actually going to be teaching a class on that for a fee. This will be a small fee involved in the beginning of January, and giving some sample letters and ways to track awards and other help. And I'll even review your award, your draft letter after you have you've written it. But yeah, I would wait. I always don't jump the gun if you haven't heard from all schools that you reasonably expect to get an award from. And for that very good reason, very perceptive, very smart, that is exactly what you should do. Wait so you can have more strength and say, look, I got this offer from college A, I got this offer from college B, so forth. Is there anything that you can do to possibly meet or even see these other offers? If you can do that, we're 100% committed to attending. That type of thing. So like I said, I'm going to be teaching class on that, but I recommend that. Good idea. Fran, asking for a friend. Whenever people say that, they're really talking about themselves. Okay. Is there a way to study marketing without applying to all these highly competitive business schools? Not interested in the math component to business schools. My answer is, I bet you dollars to donuts that some of the most successful marketers in the world never even went to business school, because the skills that you need, and I consider myself, by the way, a very good marketer. I'm probably a better marketer than I am a college guy. There's plenty of people in my field who do a lot of do well with clients and helping them get into the top schools. And Fran, I consider you one of those. But there's definitely a lot of me out in the people do what I do out in the world, in the country. But I don't think there's many people who are better at the marketing of it, like doing stuff like what I'm doing right now. I never went to business school. I never took a business class, but I studied marketing on my own. And I think to get a job in marketing with a company, I think you've got to have certain skill sets. I would think that the ability to communicate and persuade and to write, persuasively, to present, I think those are all important skills. In fact, I've seen some kids who were theater majors who ended up going into marketing and public relations and doing really well because they were very comfortable learning, how to present in group situations. So yeah, I don't think you have to go to business school at all. I think it does help to understand numbers, because a lot of people who are really good marketers or copywriters don't really understand numbers. But I don't know if you have to go all in with business school to do that. I think you can take a couple of basic accounting classes along the way and be conversant with budgeting and profit and loss statements, and I guess a balance sheet, cash flow, that type of thing, but not much else. So yeah, good question for your friend. I just think it's funny. I bet that is for a friend. Okay, Michelle Mabel. If I'm laughing, it's because I think your name's cool or possibly fake. That's how cool it is. Along with financial aid, can you negotiate merit aid? I actually think it's easier to negotiate merit. So 100%. Yeah, it's because that's really more from the admissions side, and they're not the bean counters in the financial aid office. So that's my working theory for the last 5 or 6 years. So I think you're actually better off negotiating merit. If I had to choose one that's easier, that's the easier one, actually. All right. Leslie, as FAFSA is backed up by the IRS tax returns, do you have any idea what to do if in our house, A, we're currently not married, so file separately, since my partner has made more money past years as I took off to raise daughter, he's claimed our daughter as in loco parentis for tax purposes. Well, okay, so that's a special situation. What I would tell you is that, generally speaking, household income is what comes into play. But when people are not married and they're two separate households, but they file together, usually what Pearl, my wife who does all the forms, what she does is she backs out one parent. So that's so if you could make that argument in good faith, then that's what I would be attempting to do, just to file, for the one parent. Now, to the question about whether or not declaring kid on a tax return as the dependent versus I guess you who's not declaring your daughter as a dependent, the answer is that those are IRS rules and they have really nothing to do with the Department of Education rules. So what the Department of Education wants to see on the FAFSA in terms of which parent files is the parent that the kid resides with the majority of the time, 50% plus of the time over the previous 12 months. So if you're in two different households and you can make that good faith argument that she was with you for more than half the time, then that would be the one to go with. So I'm not answering your situation dead on directly because it sounds like you're living together, but if you can remember, I don't judge, but if you can remember that you actually have two addresses and that, I see all sorts of crazy things, but the fact that it sounds like the fact that you're in one household under one roof right now means that both parents should be on there because that's actually technically the rule. So I hope that helps. So Leslie had the follow-up question. Yeah, loco parent. Loco means crazy. So that's watch your language there. Okay. It's not loco parentis for FAFSA purposes. It's dependent. Who declares? Not who declares. Who's the kid to live with? That's all that matters. That's the custodial parent. That's the term, which the custodial parent's supposed to file. Okay. All right, so I've answered every question right now. I do see Pearl Chisner Lockwood saying hi. I do see a bunch of people who are on and watching. Just checking this out here. If you have any questions, I am going to stay on for a couple more minutes just to allow your busy little fingers to type up those questions. And then I'm going to wish everyone a happy holiday because I care. Yeah. Let's see here. Fran, thanks. Really for a friend. Okay, whatever. Leslie, good. Loco's funny. Okay, you're welcome. Karen, thanks for doing this. Love the webinars too. You improv great info. Wish I was local. All right, cool. Just saying, we have 25% of our clients are not local, so you're more than welcome to pick our brains about stuff. But thank you for the feedback. And Audrey, okay, good. Some more questions. Advice on selecting large universities, small liberal arts, or 3-2 for engineering colleges. For the most part, the reviews give large universities high marks, but other information says that large universities may not have the professors teaching classes. 3-2, meaning blended options, means studying physics or math first and then engineering. Well, I see some more questions. Okay, good. So, yeah, that is the knock on the large universities is that you don't get to be taught by PhD professors. It's more adjuncts or grad students or whatever, at least for the first couple of years. some kids can deal with that and some can't. That's really a matter of preference. If you're in a large class, our oldest son goes to a state school, and what I told him, I think his first or second week there, I was like, so how big is your biggest class? And we're texting each other back and forth. And he said 350. I said, well, okay, that's pretty big. You should sit in like the first 10, 15 rows. And he texted back, I'm in row 3, jerk. So I don't know if you had that relationship with your kid, but but he really respects me. So that made me feel good, but it made me feel good that at least he was paying attention somewhat. So you have to learn to get around the system if you're going to a big state school and that is an issue. So I think what you need to do is visit these colleges and sit in on them, small classes versus big classes, and you'll be able to get a feel for what makes more sense for you. What feels better. So I don't have a firm opinion either way. They can both work depending on the kid. I mean, I once had a homeschool kid who I suggested, look, I know you're thinking you want to go to all these small schools, but just for the heck of it, why don't you go and visit a big school and sit in on a class and see how that is? And she came back and she said, you know what, the people who are paying attention were in front. That's where I would sit, and the people in the back were on, Instagram or something or Snapchat, and that's what I wouldn't be sitting with them, so I could actually deal with that if I ended up going to a state school. So you never know till you visit. So that's really my best advice in terms of quality of instruction. The rap is usually that you get a better deal, better instruction at the smaller schools, but that's a gross oversimplification and generalization. I don't think that's true across the board. We have a client right now who's a physics guy at Illinois, the main campus in Urbana, and I don't think he feels like his education is compromised in any way. I think they do a lot to make sure that the kids stay engaged and involved. So it's definitely not across. So check out that school, by the way, and just it's going to vary from school to school how you feel. All right, more cuestiones. That's a little Spanish for question. What are some of the new trends in admissions that surprise you? I don't know if anything really surprises me. I'm disappointed when clients, I think, work their butts off and have the grades and scores don't get into certain schools or get deferred from certain schools that they should. But I can't say that I'm surprised, because I just know that the process, in this process, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of, out of your control, including who else is applying. So, I don't know if it's a trend, but I'm surprised when I hear about a kid with a 35 on an ACT and superior grades not getting into Michigan, getting deferred. I'm always, mildly surprised, but then I say, why, I'll say, why are you surprised? When I hear about, kids with perfect scores, not getting into Ivy League schools and all that. I'm also surprised when our clients who may have other attributes, some of the special circumstances that, maybe they're international students or underrepresented minorities or whatever, and they do get into elite schools. I'm always happy for them, because generally they're really hardworking and conscientious, but sometimes their credentials are far lower than kids who did not get in. Right? We actually had that situation this year with a really elite school. We had a client with superior everything, academic credentials, not get into this top Ivy, and someone, one of our other clients did, who had far lesser credentials. And it's not really about deserve, I guess it's just not fair. So trend-wise, I think overall the macro trends are that and I think there's several sort of, I don't know if they're even overlapping, but there's several things going on. So first of all, there are fewer kids graduating high school than there were since 5 years ago. I think the peak was like 3.2 million. Now we're around 2.8 million or so. But colleges, especially the smaller schools, they're seeing a drop off, a lot of them, in applications and enrollment because of those trends. So I think what's happening is that there's going to be some more consolidation, particularly among the private liberal arts schools. I think they're going to be under more pressure to give money out. So I think that's a good thing, and I don't see that reversing itself just because our population is predicted to continue to sort of shrink a little bit, at least in terms of high school grads, I think until 2025 or something. I can't remember what but it was, it's a few years off. It's not a long ways off, but it's about 6 or 7 years out. So for the meantime, if you have someone heading to college the next couple of years, my guess is that it's going to be a little bit easier to get into some of the smaller private colleges. Now, the reason I said there's different sort of trends is that at the elite level, the Ivies and the near Ivy type colleges, those are going to continue, as far as I'm concerned, to be as hard to get into, period. We always see that rates, it seems like every year they report that admissions rates drop by a little, by fractional percentages each year. But I also think that it's not because they're hard to get into somehow. I just think there's more kids applying because there are, the common application continues to expand each year, so that there's a lot of colleges that continue to that are each year accepting the common application. So what that means is that if you're filling out a common application and you can apply to 25 schools just with one click of a button. So that has made more applications go in. So it's a little bit different. So there's fewer kids graduating, but there's more applications going in because there's more multiple applicants. Kids firing out all their applications. So what that means, though, is that it doesn't really affect anything other than schools not really having a feel for their yield, like how many do they have to admit in order to get to their target enrollment numbers. I still think, though, that if you're a super qualified kid and you're applying to these elite schools, it's probably just as hard now as it was 10 years ago when the admissions rates were higher because there are fewer applicants going in. So I think that's going to just continue to be super hard to get into those schools, but. I'm not, I certainly don't feel like there are going to be fewer kids applying. Harvard's still going to make $2 million a year just in application fees alone, as far as I can foresee. So I think it's the trend-wise. I think it's just going to be just the same amount of pressure and same amount of effort, to get into those types of schools. Alrighty. Audrey, you're welcome. Leslie, one more. Are some schools still raising the bar or requirements for Asian students? My daughter's Asian, but adopted by me, not Tiger Mom. So I'm just curious. That's so funny. I don't think there's I have a hard time saying there's a penalty for being Asian or raising the bar higher. Same thing. I don't think there's a penalty for being white. I don't know if I'm just being naive about it or I'm a glass half full. I don't consider myself necessarily a glass half full or glass half empty guy. I'm just a glass guy. I do think that the way I would think about it is that being Asian or Asian American is just neutral. It doesn't help. But the lawsuit that's before the Supreme Court now, I believe, has to do with a bunch of Asian Americans. I think there was one who had perfect SAT scores and didn't get into Harvard. I'm pretty sure it was Harvard. And he decided to sue because of this affirmative action policy that Harvard and a lot of elite colleges have. And to me, the most irritating thing is that Harvard says, "Oh, we don't have any, we don't have any quotas at all," but somehow magically they have the same percentage of Asian American students each year, just by coincidence. So the lawsuit, though, is sort of about what you're asking, which is that, why wasn't I admitted? But I think the fundamental question is, these are private institutions. The guy is claiming that it's not fair that he was denied, but I think the fundamental question is, does it have to be fair? Does it have, can they pick and choose on what basis they want to admit people, just the way country clubs do? And that's a fair analogy too, when you look at the amenities that are involved. So I'm not sure if that issue will be adjudicated itself, but that to me seems like the fundamental question. And to me, the fundamental answer is it's not supposed to be fair. It's not designed that way, and I don't see that changing somehow. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So I don't think the penalty to be a non-underrepresented minority. I just think it can be a little bit easier for underrepresented minorities, for international students, for recruited athletes, for legacies, parents whose kids whose parents went to that school. It's a little easier for them. So either that's a penalty or it's an absence of a penalty. I don't know. However you want to describe it. All right, Annie. Son will be a music ed major, passion to play with a backup teach. Okay, that's the game plan, I guess. Some older music ed veterans who are burnt out, discouraged, while young music ed teachers support and advise. How does a kid wrap their head around this advice? God, that's a great question. I really wish I had that answer. It's hard, because some kids just don't get it, and I think what you're doing though is the right thing. Is to have I want to play, I want to perform, but I have a backup plan. I think if anything, you have maybe come up with a plan C and a plan D also, but always lead with what you really want to do, and pursue it. And then if which is performing. And then at some point, if it doesn't work out, or the bills are piling up, hopefully before this point, or you see the writing on the wall. You always have to be able to make a living somehow, and you can play music on the side. But I like the concept of having teaching music as a backup. And I've heard the same thing. I think a lot of older teachers are a little burnt out on it, but that not everyone is. I mean, some still love it, and frankly, teaching, at least in today's environment, and with all the benefits and pension and vacations and all that, it's not really a bad gig. The amount of salary isn't enormous, but it's still a living, and you have great benefits. So things could be a lot worse than being a young music teacher and performing on weekends, on the side, to express that, to get that out. So I like that plan, but maybe there's other things to explore too as a backup. Maybe taking some business classes or whatever. So, but I don't know. I think the worst thing you can do to a kid to make them understand, the facts of life, is to constantly browbeat them and just be up there, what's about it. I think pushing hardly ever works, but pulling them toward you, that works a lot better, if that makes sense. All right, what else? We got a class guy. I love that one. Okay, if that's about me, thank you. I appreciate that. Mike Saltzman joined. Hi, Mike. I haven't talked to you in a while. And Annie, they say there are a few jobs, but that's in everything, no? Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, you want to look at job growth. Seems like in these times, music and performing arts are being slashed from a lot of school budgets. So yeah, but that doesn't mean that you can't teach lessons on the side, or do something else. And I think there's probably different gradients. There's probably different types of teaching. Maybe there's music therapy or something. I don't know. I'm not a career expert, but if there's, I definitely would not. So here's the weird thing to me, just in general about college. The college is supposed to prepare our kids for life when they get out of college in 4 or 5 years. But honestly, who knows what the hot jobs are going to be like in 4 or 5 years when kids get out of school, right? And 5 years ago, who knew what the hot jobs would be like today? Apparently, 80% of the new jobs that were created in the last 5 years were from companies that didn't exist 5 years ago. So you've got all these huge new Uber and whatever. These are all new companies. So it's kind of hard to predict what's going to be. But we in our practice we look at things like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, some other types of indicators. We have a career counselor that works with our kids to help them do that, to not only figure out how they're wired, meaning, some kids are more outgoing, some are more extroverted, some are not, some are more introverted, some are better at certain things like math and science, some are not. My own 11th grader, Harry, is just going through that right now, and it was no surprise what came up highly in his results in terms of suggested careers were being in sales and marketing as well as performance. So we're going to see what jobs correlate with that, but that was that's sort of how he's wired, and I think that's a good thing. So phase 1 was doing this assessment, and phase 2 is speaking with our career counselor So if someone is good at a particular field, like music, that could also mean that they have an aptitude in other areas. Frequently, that's probably always the case. It's coming to you as a non-expert. I believe that to be always the case. So it is hard to figure out, like, what are going to be the new hot jobs, the new trends in 5 years. Right now, a lot of people, I see them talking about cybersecurity. I think that is a great field. There is an argument that if you're a musician and you're trained to not only understand the notes but what happens in between notes, and think that way, then you might be good at who knows at searching for malware or other types of coding things that you're kind of training just to find patterns or find the absence of patterns. That's I know that sounds kind of wishy-washy, but I hear stuff like that all the time. So that happens to be a trend. Who knows? All these cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and all these other things. I'm sure there's opportunities around there. I think Overstock is forming its own currency, and I read that Amazon registered like an Amazon crypto domain or something. So I think there's definitely going to be some stuff around that field of new currencies. Who knows? So try to keep an eye out. That's what I try to do. I'm no futurist though. Okay, yeah. Plan C, math feature. Right. I think you can always, with a math background, you can always do something. So that's yeah. It's good to have a plan C. Keep going. Right. Don't stop there. All right. Speaking of stopping, I'm getting a little. I think I'm getting done here. So I'm going to give you a last call for questions, and I want to wish you everyone happy holidays. And proclaimed, I put her on the spot, that we would be back on the air next Tuesday at 12 Eastern for College Talk Tuesday, which is more of a here's what you should be doing now type of format. It's about 25-30 minutes at a clip, as opposed to every Friday, which is College Coffee Talk, which is this. It's the free coaching session. So if you have any questions, pop them into the comments. I will be checking these periodically. Feel free to stop by on our Tuesday show, and if you are on our email list, I'll post it on this page too, but we're going to be planning a few more webinars on various topics coming up in the beginning of next year, including how to negotiate with a college. So thanks a lot for watching. I'm Andy Lockwood, Lockwood College Prep, and I'm signing off. Have a great weekend and Christmas and anything that you celebrate. Bye-bye.